No, we still have some people arriving. All right. Well, what I'll do is I'll do an opening prayer here, and um, Dean, you can introduce yourself to everybody and the topic.
Okay.
Um, Great Creator God, Father in heaven, we come before you now, giving you thanks for knowledge of your Sabbath, your truth and understanding. Father, just ask for your presence here, ask for your inspiration on the speaking, on the listening. We ask for your inspiration on the discussion that'll follow later. Father, we also ask for your blessing and protection for the technology that we're using. This is a whole batch of man's foolishness that we are able to use to bring people together. Father, just ask for your keep Satan's hands off of it, and that everything goes well, and people can be connected, and we have no problems. And that even when I make a mistake, which I do plenty, and others may make mistakes, you cover for it, that nothing goes wrong. So, Father, we just place this study into your hands now, and thanking you and praising you and asking these things now in the name of your Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen. Okay,
Amen.
our guest speaker tonight is Dean Wheelock, and he will introduce himself and tell you all about him.
Well, Shabbat Shalom. At least it is where I am. My name is Dean Wheelock. My wife Susan and I have a ministry called Hebrew Roots. We publish a journal, I guess you'd say, a newsletter, and have been doing that since 1996 on the Hebrew Roots of the Faith. The faith once delivered, as we like to say. And we're located in northern Wisconsin. And anyway, if you're interested in getting on our mailing list, we're still old-fashioned. We still do paper and ink, pretty much. We do have a website, HebrewRoots.net, and you can contact us through that if you wish to. The title of my talk tonight is called Abraham's Math. That's I guess kind of a strange name, but I think you'll understand by the time we get to the end of it what I'm driving at. Over the last, I would say now 20 years, there has been a real increase in interest in the so-called Lost Tribes of Israel, sometimes called the Two House Movement. More and more people are coming to question where they came from, where the descendants of these people are today. There's many theories out there, none of which can be proved beyond a shadow of a doubt. But there are some various things we know. The Lost Tribes are known in Scripture under various names. The most common is House of Israel. Although not every time you see the House of Israel in Scripture can you say it's strictly the northern 10 tribes, because sometimes it's used in a more general sense to include the House of Israel and the House of Judah. You have to read in context to figure that out. Sometimes it's called the Northern Kingdom. Ephraim is a name that's used because that was the key tribe. Joseph is also used sometimes because Ephraim was a son of Joseph, of course, and Samaria was the capital city, so sometimes it's referred to as Samaria. And the essence of the story, which I will go over quickly here, is found in 2 Kings. I'd like to go to 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 3. You should see that on your screen in BibleWorks, which I have up. And I'm going to read verses 3 through 6. Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against him, that is, Hosea, the king of Israel. And Hosea became his vassal and paid him tribute money. And the king of Assyria uncovered a conspiracy by Hosea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and brought no tribute to the king of Assyria, and he had done as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Now the king of Assyria went throughout all the land, and went up to Samaria, and besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria took Samaria, and carried Israel away to Assyria, and placed them in the Halah, and by the Habor, the river goes on, and the cities of the Medes. And some had already been taken captive previous to this. This final installment of captivity occurred, it's believed, in 722 BCE, and they were pretty generally removed out of the land, although I have to believe there were probably a few that hid in caves and things and stuck around. But the kingdom of Judah was not taken captive. They were separate kingdoms at that point. But they were also conquered in 586 BC. That's some 130 years later. And that was, however, by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And he was replaced, the Babylonians were replaced by the Medo-Persian Empire, and the house of Judah was allowed to return to the land 70 years later, as had been prophesied, to rebuild the temple and resettle in Jerusalem. But the house of Israel never returned to the land. They became lost to the annals of history, for God had given them a bill of divorcement and sent them away. We read about that in Jeremiah chapter 3, beginning in verse 6. The Lord said also to me in the days of Josiah the king, have you seen what backsliding Israel has done? She has gone up on every high mountain and under every green tree, and there played the harlot. And I said, after she had done all these things, return to me. But she did not return, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. Then I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Israel had committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a certificate of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but went and played the harlot also. Historians have tried for decades, if not centuries, to determine where the lost tribes went. A number of theories have been put forth, some of which have some validity, some of which I don't think do, but anyway, here's a few. I've gone over to Microsoft Word here, so you should be seeing the lost tribes theories. Most Jews today claim the house of Israel, at least a remnant of them, came back to the promised land, and that is true. And they were assimilated into Judah, and therefore Israel is now counted among the Jewish people. You will hear that from Messianic Jews who say all of the house of Israel is all in amongst Judah, and there is no lost tribes out there. There is no second house, and all of that. But some other theories of where the lost tribes went and became identified as the Qingmin of Tibet, the Khazars. The Khazar was a small nation in the Middle East there who converted to Judaism, and they became what's known as the Ashkenazi Jews. At least that's where they get their name, the European Jews. Some say, that therefore the Ashkenazi Jews are not really Jewish. But of course, I believe that many of the Jews of Europe came from Judah as well in the dispersions. But there's a man named Yair Davidi. He's an Orthodox Jew who lives in Israel. He's done a lot of work in the lost tribes. And he believes, in his research, that Khazars were really from the tribe of Simeon. Simeon, as you recall, was to be scattered among all the tribes of Israel, both north and south. But whatever the case may be, one day it'll all get sorted out. Some believe the Karaites are from the lost tribes. They're the ones who are anti-rabbinic, Jews who are anti-rabbinic, following more of the traditions of the Sadducees. The Samaritans, of course, were brought into the land and resettled in the northern kingdom. And I believe there was some intermarriage, so there is a group of Samaritans that still live today up near Mount Gerizim, very small, and I believe some of those probably hold Israelite blood, if you will. The Berbers of North Africa are sometimes thought to be from the lost tribes. The Shindai tribe of Japan, I really don't know anything about them. And, of course, various American Indian groups, especially the Cherokees, are thought to be from the lost tribes. And, of course, the Mormons popularized that idea in the Book of Mormon, I guess it was, about American Indian tribes being from the lost tribes of Israel. There is one tribe, Shinlung tribe of northeast India, who have been officially recognized as part of the tribe of Manasseh, or Manasseh. And they have actually received the right of return to Israel, providing they go through a conversion process and learn the customs and traditions of modern rabbinic Judaism. There's one other tribe that's very interesting. It's the Lemba tribe of East Africa, and down in the northeast part of South Africa and that area. And some of you may be familiar with the DNA test that can be given, and they believe they know the DNA, the Y chromosome, which identifies the priesthood, the Kohanim. And that's was done initially by identifying people who claim to be Kohanim in various parts of the world, not just the United States. The name, if a man name bears the name Cohen or Khan or Kaplan or some of those derivatives, it's very likely that he is descended from Aaron. At least that's their family tradition. So they tested the DNAs of a lot of these people, and they found an 80% of them carried the same Y chromosome, and they believe that's the marker. Now, again, of course, it's not a definitive proof, but the interesting thing is the Lemba tribe had a tradition that they had come across from the Arabian Peninsula into Africa and then gradually worked their way south along the eastern coast of Africa, and that they had a priestly group of priests within them, and they too tested 80% with this Y chromosome. Very interesting, and they're all black, of course, because they intermarried. Go back to Bible Works here for a minute. So because God divorced and dispersed the house of Israel, they have become lost among the Gentile nations of the world. God gave due warning to the house of Israel as to what he intended to do in the book of Hosea. Hosea chapter 1, I want to start in verse 2. When the Lord began to speak to Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, "Go take yourself a wife of harlotry and children of harlotry, for the land has committed great harlotry by departing from the Lord." So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Then the Lord said to him, "Call his name Jezreel. For a little while I will avenge the bloodshed of Jezreel and the house of Jehu, and bring an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel." Now, Jezreel means, in Hebrew, God sows, like seed, sowing seed. Jezreel. Verse 5, "It shall come to pass in that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel," in the valley called God sows. And she conceived again and bore a daughter. And God said to him, "Call her name Lo Ruhamah." Lo Ruhamah means no mercy. "For I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. Yet I will have mercy on the house of Judah, will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword or battle, by horses or horsemen. Now when she had weaned, lo Ruhamah, she conceived and bore a son. And God said, called his name Lo Ami, which means not my people, for you are not my people, and I will not be your God. So basically God told the house of Israel he was going to scatter them among the nations. He was not going to have mercy on them anymore, and they were no longer to be considered God's people. Excuse me. Despite this dire prophecy, God also said they were going to become extremely numerous. And when that day came, God was going to regather them back to the house of Judah and bring them together back into the land. If we go to verse 10 of Hosea, first chapter, he says, Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, despite him sowing them out amongst the nations. A number number of the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered, and it shall come to pass in the place where it was said to them, You are not my people. There it shall be said to them, You are sons of the living God. Then the children of Judah and the children of Israel shall be gathered together, an appointment for themselves one head. And they shall come out of the land, for great will be the day when God sows of Jezreel. It's quite a fascinating story. The house of Israel was scattered among the nations of the earth and lost their identity. Meanwhile, the house of Judah, although they were taken captive in 586 BCE by the Babylonians, who did not lose their identity. They were allowed to return to the Promised Land. As I'm sure you know, some 70 years later, they rebuilt the temple, and they lived there until 70 Common Era, 70 AD, when the Second Temple was destroyed and the Jews were again dispersed, this time throughout the entire world. But they never lost their identity. Today, Jews can be found in every nation on earth. Although some did assimilate, most have retained their identity. And for that reason, today we find a group called the Falashas in Ethiopia. They're black-skinned Jews. Jews of Asia, who are Asian in appearance. The Ashkenazi Jews we talked of before, those of Europe who look Caucasian. The Sephardic Jews, more from the Middle East, who took Middle Eastern names. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but there are many Jews who carry Spanish names. It's said that many of the Spanish names which end in Z, the letter Z, are of Jewish origin. Gomez, Ramirez, so on. Excuse me. I'll get that out. Years ago, I was living in Southern California, and I used to get the Los Angeles Times. And one day they had a feature article in what they called column 1, the first column of the front page. And it was about Hispanics in Southern California learning about their Jewish identity. And one of the ways they did that is they would go back to Mexico, where most of them came from, and they would go to graveyards near their ancestral home, and they would find tombstones of ancestors. Now, of course, they were all supposedly Roman Catholic, and there might be a big cross on the top of the tombstone or whatever, but on some of them, down on the bottom, down in a corner, almost hidden, would be a little carving of a menorah, the 7-branch candlestick, or maybe even a Star of David, and indicating they had Jewish ancestry. And one woman was quoted as saying, when she lived in Mexico as a little girl, she said on Friday evenings, their family would go down into the basement, they would light candles, and the parents told the children, we don't know why we do this, but our family has always done it, and don't tell anybody. So it's interesting that having a letter Z, a Spanish name that ends in Z, is not a sure mark that you're Jewish, have Jewish ancestry, but it is something to look into if you if you carry a name like that. Then, of course, we have, I'm going to go back to my Microsoft Word here, British Israelism. British Israelism basically began in the 19th century and became popular in the early 20th century. This teaching, the majority of the lost 10 tribes are said to have migrated as a body into northwestern Europe, where they became the physical ancestors of the modern nations found there. Primarily, the British Israelites taught that the Caucasian peoples of the British Isles and the United States respectively constituted the lost tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. The first British Israel teacher was an Englishman named Richard Brothers. He lived from 1757 to 1824, and he believed that God had given him a divine mission to lead the Jews back to Palestine, that he was a direct descendant of the house of King David. The actual British Israelite movement began with a teacher named John Wilson, who died in 1871, so it was sometime prior to that. I'm not sure of a date there. Wilson attempted to demonstrate that the lost tribes had migrated from the Middle East up into Europe. One of the ways he did this was by finding words in different languages which sounded the same, such as British. Brit-ish means covenant man in Hebrew. The only problem is that in Hebrew it would have been expressed as ish brit, a man covenant, because that's the way Hebrew is phrased. Then, of course, there's the Saxons, who they believe was a corruption of Isaac's sons. Denmark, they say, means Dan's mark, for the tribe of Dan, and Jutland, which is a peninsula off of Denmark, is Jews' land. So whatever, again, you can't really go to the bank on those things, but they're interesting ideas. In 1870, a congregational church pastor named Joseph Wilde began to teach British Israel theory in the United States, and numerous other men picked up the teaching. One of the most notable was J.H. Allen. He wrote a book called Judah's Scepter, Joseph's Birthright. And Allen had a direct influence on Herbert Armstrong, who was a major British Israel teacher in the 20th century, although he did not call it that. In classic British Israel teaching, it was taught that the Jews, or the house of Judah, were the brothers of the lost tribes of the house of Israel. However, today, some have perverted the original British Israel teaching by claiming that the Jews are not really the Jews, and that the only racially pure Israelites are those Caucasians who are said to be the descendants of the house of Israel. These teachers from various radical right-wing religious groups claim that the modern-day Jews are imposters, and that the real descendants of the house of Judah all became followers of Yeshua in the first century, and that today's Jews are really Edomites descending from Esau, or they are from other, as they sometimes call them, mongrel races. One of the first men to pervert British Israel teaching was Reuben Sawyer, an Oregon clergyman who was involved with the Ku Klux Klan in the early 1920s. In Sawyer's view, the mixed race line of the lost 10 tribes somehow became the pure blood line, while the much more racially pure line of the Jews, although there are no completely racially pure lines today, but they were called impure. And the worst of the anti-Semitic teachings, in my opinion, is the Satan seed doctrine, where both Jews and blacks are said to be descendants of Cain, who was fathered by Hasatan, or Satan the devil, not by Adam. However, there's a good and easy way to dispute that from Scripture. It's found in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Very clearly says that Cain was the descendant of Adam, not the descendant of Hasatan. The idea that the Jews who rejected Yeshua were descended from Esau is also easily refuted. In John chapter 1, verse 11, talking about Jesus, or Yeshua, it says, he came to his own, and his own did not receive him. Well, I submit to you that if the people who rejected Yeshua were Edomites, if this verse is to be true, then Yeshua had to be an Edomite. But we know this is not true. We know from Scripture in Hebrews 7:14, it's evident that our Lord arose from Judah, of which tribe Moses spoke nothing concerning priesthood. So Yeshua was a Jew from the tribe of Judah. Those who were his own who were his own that rejected him were also Jews. Of course, on the other hand, there were thousands of Jews who accepted him as Messiah. We read about that in Acts chapter 21, verse 20. When they heard it, they glorified the Lord, and they said to him, "You see, brother, how many myriads of Jews there are who have believed, and they are all zealous for the law." Myriads, thousands. Some say tens of thousands. So thus today we have the original British Israel teaching often taking a bum rap because of those who have perverted the original teaching into something racist, something anti-Semitic. Some also deny the teaching of J.H. Allen and Herbert Armstrong. However, I believe that instead we should honor their teaching, not because it was fully correct, for it wasn't, and its teachings today are still not fully correct, but because it was a stepping stone to what we understand today. They were, in a sense, pioneers in this topic. But there's a new approach that's being taught now. It's being expounded by Batya Wooten. She and her husband Angus have founded an organization called the Messianic Israel Alliance, which today has been now called the Alliance of Redeemed Israel, I believe, ARI. She wrote a book called Who is Israel and Why You Need to Know. And her take on it is that she believes that many of the Christians of the West are descendants of the lost tribes. And they have Messiah, while the house of Judah has the Torah, or the Tanakh, the Old Testament, if you will. Another one is Eddie Chumney. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. Eddie is a Messianic teacher. He's written a book about close on 15 or more years ago called Restoring the Two Houses of Israel. And I want to dwell on what Eddie teaches a little bit. They put forth a proposition that the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob may be far more widespread among the peoples of the world than just those of Anglo-Saxon stock, which the British Israel people taught. In fact, the physical seed of Abraham may, by this time, have become nearly universal. Now, that's a bizarre statement, but I want to see if I can back it up for you. The basis of this idea lies in one of the how one interprets a passage in Genesis chapter 12, beginning in verse 1. We should be back in Bible Works now, or very shortly. Genesis 12:1 reads, "Now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you, and in you all families of the earth will be blessed." Now, I want to zero in on the verse 3 where it says, "In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed," and especially on the word blessed. Now, Eddie Chumney and others interpret this crucial verse as follows, and I'm quoting now. In Hebrew, Genesis 12:3 is written, and we have the line here under Eddie's name, "V'nivraku beka kol mishpachat ha'adma." The usual word for blessed is yivraku with a Y, not nivraku with an N. And let me go on with his quote here. The Hebrew word nivraku is translated in most English texts as be blessed. However, the usual Hebrew word for be blessed is not nivraku, it is yivraku. The word nivraku is the nifal conjugation of the Hebrew word barak. The Hebrew word barak has a deeper meaning than just blessed. Going on, still quoting, in 5 places in the Talmud and other rabbinic literature, nivraku is translated as grafted or intermingled. In the Orthodox Jewish Art Scroll Tanakh, it says there, and now this is a quote within a quote, there is an opinion shared by Rashbam, he's one of the sages, and others, that the verb v'nivraku in Genesis 12:3 is related to the root barak as in the Mishnaic term mavrik, meaning to intermingle or graft. This interpretation is inspired by the fact that nowhere else besides here do we find barak in the sense of blessing in the nifal conjugation, while in the sense of grafting it is common in that form, unquote. Now, I know I threw a lot at you there. But what it means is that the verse in question could be more properly translated as follows. And I have it down there at the bottom. And in you, all families of the earth shall be grafted in, should be, or intermingled. I left a word out there. Sorry about that. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, in a sense, does this nivraku theory fly? Does this interpretation and translation of Genesis 12:3 stand up when it is tested against other scriptures? Now, the Apostle Paul, in Galatians chapter 3, taught that all believers in Yeshua are of the seed of Abraham. I'm sure you're familiar with that scripture, but let me just read it briefly here. Galatians 3:26, for you have, excuse me a minute, I got something going on here. Sorry for that. For you are all sons of God through faith in Christ Jesus, Messiah Yeshua. For as many of you as were baptized into Messiah have put on Messiah. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female. For you are all one in Messiah Yeshua. And if you are Messiahs, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Now, this passage is most universally understood to mean that when one is immersed into Messiah or baptized into Messiah Yeshua, they become Abraham's seed spiritually. However, it might also be understood to mean that the very fact that a Gentile becomes a believer in the Jewish Messiah Yeshua may indicate that he is already the physical seed and a physical descendant of Abraham. That's the assumption behind the nivraku theory, that all or nearly all people who are believers in Yeshua HaMashiach are very likely not only the spiritual descendants of Abraham, but his physical descendants as well. And this has turned into a big issue in the Messianic movement. And so now we want to go to back over here. We're going to do a little bit of Abraham's math. In May 2002, I started on this topic years ago. The Atlantic Monthly magazine ran an article on genealogy. The writer was named Steve Olson. He was not a genealogist himself, but he'd done some family research and was familiar with the procedures involved in tracing one's family tree. During a visit to Ireland, which was one of the countries of his ancestry, Olson met a computer scientist and genealogist at Dublin City University named Mark Humphreys. One of the discoveries Humphreys made in his research was, and again I'm going to quote now, whenever a reliable family tree was available, almost anyone of European ancestry turned out to be descended from English royalty, even such unlikely people as Hermann Goring and Daniel Boone. Humphreys began to think that such descent was the rule rather than the exception in the Western world, even if relatively few people had documents to demonstrate it, unquote. It's interesting to note, in my opinion, that if one is descended from English royalty, then they might also be descended from King David of Israel, for the royal family has genealogical charts showing their ancestry all the way back to David. In fact, Prince Charles was on Channel 1 in Israel one time when Susan and I were visiting there, and I did not see the interview myself, but I heard about it, where he was telling the Israeli public that he was descended from King David. Whether it's true or not, one day we'll know for sure. But there is what I believe is mathematical evidence. According to another man named Eliezer Schulman, in his book Sequence of the Events of the Old Testament, Abraham was born in the year 1948 from creation. Bishop Ussher calculated creation as occurring in 404 BC, and while there's some controversy over that, we'll just use that as a baseline, so that the birth of Abraham would have been in 2056 BCE. Or thereabouts. This means about 470 years have passed since the birth of Abraham. Now, if we use 25 years for each generation, it means that we are almost 163 generations removed from Abraham. If we use 40 years for each generation, we're about 102 generations removed. And if we use 100 years for each generation, we're nearly 41 generations removed from the time of Abraham. Looking at this chart I have up here, I have you and your ancestors. You're number one, they're on the top. Your parents are number twos, your grandparents 4 number 3s. Your ancestry goes in a geometric progression. All you computer buffs, you know it's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 264, 512, and so on. It goes up. And as we go down, I've listed it out in numbers just so you could see graphically in the ninth removal from yourself, how many 9s it takes. Let's see, that's 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. That's 256 9s there if I did it right. And it just keeps growing. So each generation back has twice as many people in it as the previous one. As we go down here onto the next page, you see if we get down to the 41st generation, which would be Abraham's generation if generations were 100 years, in order to have your ancestry, you would have, if every one of your ancestors was a unique individual person, you would have over 1 trillion ancestors. But that's more people by far than certainly lived at Abraham's time. In fact, we only have what they say 7 billion about on Earth today, and it's the largest population that's ever existed. But even in the 34th generation, we reached that more than 7 billion. There's 8.5 billion. So the average length of a generation is open to debate. That's why I've included 3 different ones here. 25 years is pretty common today. 40 years, you could make a biblical case for that. You can make a biblical case for 100 years. But needless to say, there could not have been at the time of Abraham in excess of 1 trillion people on Earth. It means that all of us have millions upon millions of people in our earlier generations who are duplicated within our individual family tree. A personal example, many years ago I was doing some research on my family tree, who were in the colonies early on in the 1700s. And as I went back, I found this same couple 3 times between today and about 1650, 1700. I can't remember exactly when they lived. So 3 different of their descendants, just in that short a period of time, are in my family tree. They're cousins of some kind, maybe rather distant cousins, but we have millions of those. And so what it boils down to is that we're all cousins. In addition, to make matters even more complicated, our family tree really represents a diamond, like I have on the bottom of this page there. If you're the one on X on the top there, and it begins to multiply out and then multiply down to Adam and Eve, two people. It's the only way it can be, that all of the many, many in between are duplicated in our family tree. And so, what do the genealogists say? In the Atlantic Monthly article, Steve Olson says, and I quote, "The idea that virtually anyone of a European ancestor depends from English royalty seems bizarre, but it accords perfectly with some recent research done by Joseph Chang, a statistician at Yale. In a 1999 paper called Recent Common Ancestors of All Present-Day Individuals, Chang showed how to reconcile the potentially huge number of our ancestors with the quantities of people who actually lived in the past. Under the conditions laid out in his paper, the most recent common ancestor of every European today, except for recent immigrants to the continent, of course there are a lot of those now, was someone who lived in Europe in the surprisingly recent past, only about 600 years ago. In other words, all Europeans alive today have among their ancestors the same man or woman who lived around 1400 AD. I'll give you a personal example of this. When I was doing my research years ago, I took a class in genealogy. And the first night the instructor got up, and one of the first questions he asked is, how many of you have French ancestry? Well, I had a grandmother who was half French, so I raised my hand. He said, all of those people who had their hands up are descended from Charlemagne, who lived around 800 AD. Charlemagne apparently was a prolific sire of children, and all Frenchmen carry his genes, a little bit of his DNA today, so they believe. But going on here, however, the mathematical model developed by Chang contains one assumption that can change the seemingly incredible fact that everyone has a common ancestor of around 1400 AD. It assumes that every person in Europe over this 600-year period could potentially marry any other person of the opposite sex in Europe. According to Mr. Olson, who wrote the article, he said, quote, "These departures from randomness must push back somewhat the date of Europeans' most recent common ancestor," unquote. So 1400 Common Era is not really a realistic date for the common ancestor. However, there has been a great churning of people in the world over the last several hundred years as European civilization spread around the world during the Age of Discovery. I have a little article I want to read to you from a magazine called The Week. It's very brief. "The Truth About Race is Gray," written by a man named Brent Staples in a column in the New York Times. He said, "People ask me how a black man came by such a white name as Brent Staples. Staples is, in fact, an English name, which my family apparently inherited from the transplanted Britons who owned our ancestors in Virginia. I recently took a DNA test offered by a company that tracks people's racial and ethnic origins, and it turns out that slave owners had given us more than a preference for British names. They'd also given us their DNA. While half of my genes originated in Africa, a quarter came from Europe. To my surprise, a fifth came from Asia. This is actually a common result among people who take these ancestry tests. People who consider themselves black turn out to have white, Native American, and other ancestries mixed in. And many white people discover to their surprise that there are African Americans mixed into their family history. These DNA tests are finally proving what anthropologists have long argued: race in this country is a social construct, not a true genetic category. That's because in America's tortured racial past, there was a great deal of furtive race mixing. In every generation going back to emancipation, thousands of light-skinned people of mixed race have chosen to pass themselves off as white. They intermarried with unsuspecting Europeans, mixing their genes with those of Italians, Irish, and other Caucasians. Blacks, too, intermarried with Native Americans, Asians, and Europeans, so that few people now identified as black have wholly African genes. the ultimate point is that none of us really know who we are ancestrally speaking. We only know what our ancestors choose to tell us. And I could give you some examples, I guess. I knew years ago a woman who was Japanese. She had been born in Hawaii, and she used to say she had hair on her arms. And she used to say, "Look, I have hair on my arms." She said, "Orientals don't have hair on their arms, even the men." She said, "Where did that come from?" She said, "Well, probably from some missionary or some intermarriage with somebody from the Caucasian race." But anyway, the fact is that there has been much racial mixing, especially in this country. So this adds a whole new dimension to the idea of being grafted in. I want to go to Romans 11. Romans 11, verse 11. "I say then," Paul writes, "have they stumbled that they should fall?" This is talking about Israel. "Certainly not, but through their fall, to provoke them to jealousy, salvation has come to the Gentiles." Now, if their fall, that is, the fall of Israel, is riches for the world, and their failure riches for the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? "For I speak to you, Gentiles, inasmuch as I'm apostle to the Gentiles, I magnify my ministry, if by any means I may provoke to jealousy those who are my flesh, and save some of them. For if their being cast away is a reconciling of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? If the first fruit is holy, the lump is also holy, and if the root is holy, so are the branches." And it goes on. I suggest you study chapters 9, 10, and 11 of Romans and get a better sense of what Paul is trying to say here. The casting away of Israel was only a temporary phenomenon, so that the world as a whole can eventually be reconciled. Is it possible this refers to the casting away of the house of Israel through a written bill of divorcement that we saw back in Jeremiah 3? I submit that God cast away the house of Israel in order to spread, to sow the seed of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, around the world. Now through Yeshua, he's calling a remnant of those castaway Israelites who think they are Gentiles back to the commonwealth of Israel. Isaiah likens the children of Israel to a vineyard that was planted with much hope and promise, but which failed to produce good fruit. Isaiah chapter 5. Verse 1. "Now let me sing to my well-beloved a song of my beloved regarding his vineyard. My well-beloved has a vineyard on a very fruitful hill. He dug it up and cleared out its stones and planted it with the choicest vine. He built a tower in its midst and also made a winepress in it, so he expected it to bring forth good grapes, but it brought forth wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge please between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done to my vineyard that I have not done in it? Why then, when I expected it to bring forth good grapes, did it bring forth wild grapes? And now please let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it shall be burned, and break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will lay it waste, it shall not be pruned or dug. There shall come up briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that rain. They rain no rain on it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant plant. He looked for justice, but behold oppression, for righteousness, but behold a cry for help." So once again, he's castigating both the house of Israel and the house of Judah, for they failed to live up to the expectations and hopes which were invested in them when he called them out of Egypt. He calls them wild grapes instead of good fruit. God sent both houses into captivity, but Judah was allowed to return so that the promised Messiah could be brought forth. In chapter 5 and verse 13 we read of Isaiah, "Therefore my people have gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. Their honorable men are famished and their multitude dried up of thirst." Physical thirst, yes, but more importantly, they're dried up with They have a spiritual thirst. The house of Judah returned, as we know, and in 1948 the house of Judah was again given sovereignty over a portion of the promised land. However, the house of Israel has yet to return. Isaiah 5 verse 26, he will lift up a banner to the nations from afar and will whistle to them from the end of the earth. Surely they shall come with speed, swiftly. You hear God's whistling to you? You hear him calling Ephraim back to join with Judah? The house of Israel will return. I hope I'm not running too long here, but I just want to share another little story with you. A number of years ago, we met a man who was from the States, who was not Jewish, who lived and worked in Israel. He was an editor in the English language Jerusalem Post for 11 years. And he called himself a Joe. He called them the Jews and the Joes, the house of Judah and the house of Joseph. And he was very interested in rabbinic teachings and that sort of thing, so he told me that he was taken one day to meet a very elderly rabbi in Jerusalem. And he got to the rabbi's house and he was introduced. The rabbi said to him, "Why are you here?" And this fellow said, "Well, I have a great love for the Jewish people and for Israel." And he said the rabbi slammed his hand on the table and said, "This is not Israel. This is Judah. Israel has yet to return." This is an ultra-Orthodox Jew who knows the house of Israel is gone and it's not come back yet. And so we read in Isaiah chapter 11, beginning in verse 10, "In that day, when they do return, there shall be a root of Jesse who shall stand as a banner to the people. For the Gentiles shall seek him, and his resting place shall be glorious. It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord will set his hand a second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left from Assyria and Egypt, from Pathros and Cush, from Elam and Shinar, from Hamath and the islands of the sea. He will set up a banner for the nations, and will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." So now we're better able to understand Romans 11, where Paul speaks about the Gentiles who are grafted into the olive tree of Israel. Interestingly enough, he's talking to the he talks to the Galatians too about being grafted in. And the people of Galatia, historically, the historians will tell you this, are really part of the Celtic race. That's like the Irish, the Welsh, some of the Scotch, some of the French. They had migrated up into France, and then they came back into Central Asia Minor there. The Galatians were probably mostly descendants from the lost tribes. Whether they knew it or not, I don't know, but I think maybe they did, and I think Paul might have. So we go back to Romans 11, verse 15. "For if there, being cast away, is the reconciling, that is the house of Israel and the house of Judah, is the reconciling in the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? For if the first fruit is holy, the lump is holy, and if the root is holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them became a partaker of the root and fatness of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches, but if you do boast, remember that you do not support the root. The root supports you." And then we are attached to God through Yeshua. He's the banner that was spoken of in Isaiah. We're attached into the chosen people of God, the commonwealth of Israel, not into a Gentile church. So today the descendants of the house of Israel and even some of the descendants of the house of Judah do not know they are of the physical seed of Abraham. They believe themselves to be full-blooded Gentiles. The full restoration will occur when God removes all of the sins of his people, Israel. Going on down in verse 25 of Romans 11. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come out of Zion, and he will turn away ungodliness from Jacob, for this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Concerning the gospel, they are the enemies for your sake, but concerning the election, they are beloved for the sake of their fathers, speaking of the Jewish people of that day. The book of Hosea is a prophecy that's addressed specifically to the house of Israel. Previously read in chapter 1 how God was going to sow Jezreel, the house of Israel, throughout the nations of the world. He promised to have no mercy. Lo Ruhamah was the daughter's name. No mercy on them. He said they would not be his people. They would be Lo Ami. These prophecies began to be fulfilled in 722 BCE when the northern tribes were taken captive. They've continued to be fulfilled down through the centuries and right up into our time. For today the house of Israel is still scattered throughout the world, and the house of Israel, for the most part, still does not know they are literal descendants of Abraham. Today the house of Israel still believes they are Gentiles. But God also promised to bring the house of Israel back to the land. Hosea chapter 2, verse 14, Therefore behold, I will allure her. I will bring her into the wilderness and speak comfort to her. I will give her her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor as a door of hope. She shall sing there as in the days of her youth, as in the day when she came up from the land of Egypt. And it shall be in that day, says the Lord, that you will call me my husband, and no longer call me my master. For I will take from her mouth the names of the Baals, and they shall be remembered by their name no more. In that day I will make a covenant with them, with the beasts of the field, with the birds of the air, and with the creeping things of the ground. Bow and sword of battle I will shatter from the earth to make them lie down safely. And then there's this beautiful passage that's used in Jewish weddings. I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and justice, in loving kindness and mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord. It shall come to pass in that day that I will answer, says the Lord. I will answer the heavens, and they shall answer the earth. The earth shall answer with grain, with new wine, with oil. They shall answer Jezreel. They shall answer God sows. Then I will sow her for myself in the earth, and I will have mercy on her who did not have mercy. That's Ruhamah. And I will say to those who were not my people, Lo Ami, you are my people, Ami. And they shall say, you are my God. It's a return of the house of Israel. A great event. And so, to kind of sum it all up here, the northern 10 tribes of the house of Israel were taken captive in 722, never to return to the land of Israel as a recognizable body of people up to this day. A small remnant of them are undoubtedly mixed in with today's Jewish population. The vast majority of the house of Israel have spread around the world. In some cases, they remained together and became known by other names. The Shinlung of India, the Lemba of Africa, and so on, the Anglo-Saxon people of Britain, the Celts of Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and France. Many remained in the vast stretches of Asia, while others migrated into Africa and Europe. Eventually, the descendants of the house of Israel made their way to the New World and even the islands of the South Pacific. Through intermarriage, the skin color and facial features of those original Israelites have taken on the form of the indigenous people with whom they intermarried, so that today Israelites can be found among all the people groups of the world. The veracity of this claim can now be substantiated through genealogical, statistical, and statistical research. The claim that all people on the face of the earth today are quite likely descended from a single individual who lived only 2,000 years ago makes it even more feasible that everyone could very well be descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Isaiah 51, verse 1 and 2, listen to me, You who follow after righteousness, you who seek the Lord, look to the rock from which you were hewn, and to the hole of the pit from which you were dug. Look to Abraham your father, and to Sarah who bore you, for I called him alone, and blessed him and increased him. What does it mean to have physical descendants? To be the physical descendants of these great patriarchs and matriarchs? Well, quite frankly, it doesn't mean a thing unless one has dedicated their life to serving the eternal God of creation, the one who is the giver of life. There's no advantage to tracing one's genealogy, trying to prove ancestry from the patriarchs. Paul warns about that in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 3, as I urged you when I went to Macedonia, remain in Ephesus, that you may charge those, may charge some that they teach no other doctrine, nor give heed to fables and endless genealogies which cause disputes rather than godly edification, which is in the faith. Now the purpose of the commandment is love from a pure heart, from a good conscience, from sincere faith. From a human standpoint, it's interesting to find out if one has Jewish, Levite, priestly ancestry. But it's not really important and can sometimes lead to pride and jealousy. Titus chapter 3, verse 9. But avoid foolish disputes, genealogies, contentions, and strivings about the law, for they are unprofitable and useless. Oh, how we love to strive over the law. Whether we as individuals are physical descendants of the house of Israel, the house of Judah, or through some quirk of genealogy we really are full-blooded Gentiles is not what is important. The important thing is that we have been grafted back into the commonwealth of Israel through Messiah Yeshua. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 11 and 12, therefore remember that you, once Gentiles in the flesh, or who thought you were Gentiles in the flesh, were called uncircumcision by what is called a circumcision made in the flesh by hands, that at that time you were without Messiah, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in Messiah Yeshua, you who were once far off have been brought near by the blood of Messiah. The house of Israel was divorced by God and became just like Gentiles in the flesh. But now all of us are brought together in service to God through the blood of Messiah Yeshua. I'd like to close with 1 John chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. This is the message which we have heard from him and declare to you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. If we say we have fellowship with him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ his Son, cleanses us from all sin. So let's walk in the light by knowing who we are, and let us continue to be cleansed by the precious blood of Yeshua. So that's what I have. Is anybody left?
No, we're all here. Some people have been coming and going, but
I heard little beeps here and there.
Yeah, the beep is people coming and going. People come in, they listen for a little bit, and then they take off.
Rich Daniels is there. Say hi to Rich. Haven't seen him for a long time.
Well, if Rich turns his camera on, he can. Of course, every now and then he has trouble with his computer. No, he's got his mic on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're soft.
Barely.
Okay. How you doing, Dean?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I've been better. I've had my power.
Well, I keep thinking I'm going to run into you in Green Bay or somewhere someday, but that doesn't happen.
Well, I'm in shape now. I don't really go anywhere. I can't breathe. If it wasn't for that, I'd be in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
Worse.
Well, I'm glad you're with us tonight.
Yeah, well, I try to tune in. I got my daughter and son-in-law. I have a place up in Lakewood, and I often thought about going up there. But
yeah.
Back a while back, the doctor took my license away from me, so I can't even drive. So I thought, well, I can't get my car away, and that's gone too. So now if I want to go anywhere, it's impossible.
You need to get a different doctor.
Well, if they took me for a walking test, it wouldn't make any difference because I can't walk very far. I'm glad to hear you're doing good, though.
Yeah, we're doing okay.
I'm good.
Survived another winter.
No, that's something big.
Yeah. Well, I guess we might have some comments or questions.
If you have the ability to turn on your camera, if you'd like to ask a question, turn on your camera. Otherwise, speak up.
People are quiet. They're always quiet.
Sometimes take people a chance to go back through their thinking to come up with the question they had earlier.
I see another name here I haven't seen for a long time, Howard Nas.
Is his name there? I don't see it.
It's in the middle.
Yeah. Well, I know Howard out in Colorado some.
Yeah.
Out there. Still out there?
Hello, Howard.
Hey, hello. This is me. Hi, Dean.
Hi, Howard. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
All right.
I was kind of surprised to see your name on this.
Oh, I was. They when they get desperate, they get me on every couple of years.
Well, it's really good to hear you. Good to see you. And the same for you, Rich.
I haven't heard you in a long time.
Yeah.
Glad to hear you.
There it is.
You still in Colorado?
Still in Colorado. I'm in Johnstown, which is about 25 miles from Fort Collins, where Virgil is. In fact, I was thinking of sending him this link here, so he could get on here. I'm sure he'd be happy to hear you likewise.
Yeah.
How is Teresa doing?
Okay, well, that's good to hear you.
Doing okay overall.
Tell everybody out there I know hi.
Okay, I sure will, Dean.
All right. There's probably some others, only first names here that I know too, but I don't recognize them by their first names. But anyway,
you might see somebody.
Say what?
If they would all turn their camera around, you might see somebody. My camera doesn't seem to be doing very good tonight. Guess I don't have it on. Maybe I don't have it on.
Yeah, I don't have mine on. I'm trying to find my icon here.
On the top, on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a control panel. There's a microphone there that you can. It's either green or it's dark. And then next to that is a screen. Yeah, there you are.
Yeah.
Hey, there's Rich.
That's how ugly I look these days.
Howard's coming up. Nope, he went away.
Went away? Well, let's try it again.
Rich is a little splat. There, that's better.
I'm trying to take my cap off, but I had it off. I put it back on again.
Hey, Rich, you're looking good.
Thank you. Looks you're only skin deep.
There he is.
Yeah, that's me.
I only see about the top half of your head, but that's okay.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to adjust my monitor here a little bit. That's a little better.
Yeah, it is. You're looking older than you ever did. Well,
there's Howard.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hey, Dean, I think last time I saw you, you didn't have a beard, did you?
I'm pretty sure I did. I've had a beard since 1981.
Oh, okay. I guess you did. Maybe it's the cap you were.
Yeah, it's white now. It used to be red.
Oh, okay. You want to see this, Teresa?
So, anyway, this topic I always find fascinating.
See the lady behind me? That's Teresa. Oh, she ran away.
Oh, okay.
I see her running fast. Left a little dust behind her.
Yeah, the picture's a little
fuzzy.
There, that one's better.
Okay. What we're going to do is we encourage fellowshipping in that. Let's just see if there's a couple people with some comments or questions, and then
yes.
Once we get the comments and questions taken care of, then I will officially end the Bible study, and then we have open fellowship. So,
And then
is
we
there
can
anybody
schmooze,
with a
huh?
comment or question?
Who is that speaking? Is that Don?
That's me. My camera isn't working, and you don't want to see me. I just came home from driving truck all week.
Did you have a tough week?
Usual week.
Dean, off the top of your head, how many ancestors do we have all through the years?
2.
2 trillion?
We have 2, Adam and Eve, and then we have 2 more, Noah and his wife. And then it starts to increase, and then it comes down to us. It's kind of mind-boggling, you know, when I first learned about some of this stuff, and it just how we can't hardly help but all be cousins, although we sure could never figure out how far apart we are. But
yeah, I've thought of that often. We all started with 2 people. We're all related, like it or not.
I'm having trouble hearing.
I said we all came from the same 2 people. I said we're all related, whether we like it or not.
That's right.
Dean, I don't know if you see there's a chat room on the side there.
Oh, yeah.
Tom and Nancy Altridge from Iowa say hello.
Oh, that's Tom and Nancy, yeah. I've been going to call them. And glad they're watching. I was wondering that when I saw Tom. So, how many ancestors do we have? The important thing is we had 2. We had a mother and a father. But you know, it's like when you grow up in a small town. And my mother was born and raised in Iowa, and they moved up to northern Wisconsin, and she was going back as a young woman to visit relatives in Iowa, and her mother told her, "Now be careful what you say, who you talk to, because you're probably talking about your relatives." And
so, Mike Waters, I can't believe you're not going to say something about this discussion.
Oh, my mic is on.
Oh, okay. Mike, it's all. Ask your question. Get this thing rolling.
Oh, first I want to say thanks for the presentation. It was very good. I've done maybe 15 years of study myself on the Genome Project, and I think at this point they can lay down right to the next eyebrow where you're from and who your ancestors are and where the mitochondrial DNA micromutations occurred along the line, and so I have a lot of confidence in the Genome Project. You know, so I was pretty well following along with what you were saying, and especially with the autosomal DNA, they can break down which percent of which tribe you're from. But that all costs a lot of money.
yep.
And
is it worth it?
yeah. The biblical verse I wanted to ask about is in Genesis 48, and where we have the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh.
Right.
And where it says in verse 19 that they would become a multitude of nations.
Right.
Well, that Hebrew word is goy, which
Right.
Mostly is used as Gentiles. So wondering if you had a comment on, you know, them becoming a multitude of Gentiles.
Yeah, well, there are other places where Israel and Judah are called goy, because that's really what the word means, is nation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure we can read this theory into that, but it's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought about that before. certainly the house of Israel, as we understand, having been gone into captivity and losing their identity, think they're Gentiles, and they act like Gentiles, quite frankly. But God, there's this prophecy in Amos. I can't remember exactly offhand where it is, but it talks about not one kernel will be lost. And speaking of Israel, I'm not sure I can find that, but we will be he sift the house of Israel. Is that the word I want?
Yes, that's the word. Sift them through the nations. And then
Amos 9:9.
Yes.
For surely I will command and will sift the house of Israel among all nations, as grain is sifted in a sieve. Not the smallest grain shall fall to the ground. And all Israel will be saved, Paul said in Romans 11.
Yes.
So, there's great hope for those in our families who don't know about this or don't care about it. God holds them in his hand. And I believe that he will deal with each one according to how they need to be dealt with. And I have great hope that the day will come, if not in the kingdom, in the world to come, when I'll be reunited with loved ones that were Catholics or whatever, or nothing. But gives me great hope.
My personal observation after years of study is that the original micromutation of the Y chromosome would be J1, and then the mitochondrial DNA on the female side would go back to the basic matriarchal DNA of K, and then it varies from there depending upon which nation they went to.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe I need to have you update my talk.
Well, that's the result of my years of study, and it matches the tribal movements through the nations, as well as language groups, and then also the archaeological finds and cultural aspects, as well as medical DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't gotten real heavily into the DNA thing. I did have a DNA test done a couple of years ago, and all they did was parrot back what I told them. Where did your father's ancestors come from? And my mother's mother was her. I guess my mother's grandparents were both born in Ireland, so that was pretty clear where that was going. And my dad's side of the family, it seemed like the original one may have been over where it started between the Black and Caspian Seas, in the Caucasus region, I guess it would be, but then moved into the British Isles primarily. But I don't know. Some people find really interesting things in their DNA, like this little article I wrote about the black man. He found these black and white and Asian and who knows what else.
I was just watching a video about the B'nai Menashe from India, that the nation of Israel is admitting them in as Jewish people,
right,
based upon their DNA and their culture,
and their willingness to practice rabbinic Judaism.
Yeah, they weren't very far off. It was unbelievable how close their practices were to the Judaism. And that was their cultural legends or mythology or whatever you might say, is that they fled from the land of the Medes and got pushed from one place to another until they kind of found a safe haven up north of Bangladesh, between Bangladesh and Bhutan, I guess. And then, but they maintained kosher, they maintained animal sacrifice, and then the traditions, the basic traditions. And so,
and which group of people was this?
B'nai Menashe. They're just in northern India.
Oh, yes, okay.
Northeastern India. And they're letting them migrate.
Right. The first time we went to Israel, and our first visit to the Temple Mount, we're getting off the bus, and it was on a Thursday, I think, which is one of the days they bring the new bar mitzvah boys to the Western Wall for prayer, their first prayer at the wall as sons of the commandment. And these boys were all getting off the bus, and they're all dressed up, white shirts, ties, dark pants, kippas, and they're all black.
Yes.
Or Falashas from Ethiopia.
Yes. And you have the Lemba.
Yeah, and then this Lemba tribe is really an interesting story. I read a book about them a number of years ago, and the native African women, as they migrated down the East Coast, preferred being married to a Lemba because the men treated them so much better, because that was part of their culture. Having come, their tradition was that they were Jews who crossed from Arabia into Africa, and they were white when they came across. And now they're all black because of the intermarriage.
Yeah, and then with their many of the Kohen DNA.
Right. Yeah, the priestly caste has 80%, I think it was, about the same as you find in Europe and the United States among those who claim to be Cohens.
Yeah, the rabbinic Jewish, yes.
So it's very interesting. I don't know if any of you are aware, there's a couple in Israel that we met years ago. Actually, he's from Wisconsin. His name is Ephraim Frank. Ephraim and Ramona. She's an Israeli, and they live in a city called Ariel, north of Jerusalem now. And he's an Ephraimite by his own understanding, and he's having a conference over Pentecost weekend there on the return of Ephraim. And I got contact. Somebody forwarded me an email, and I had met him, so I contacted him. Of course, we're not able to go, but it's very interesting because there seems to be an increasing awareness. And that story I told about the Orthodox Jew who said Israel has not returned. And that was probably 15 years ago when this man told me that story. They know it's the Reformed Jews and the assimilated Jews who think all the tribes are found within the Jewish people. But those who understand the Torah and understand their history know that that's not true. And there's going to be a great gathering. Of course, Ezekiel 37 talks about that. That's the big chapter for the joining of the two sticks.
Well, one of the greatest areas of J1 Y chromosome DNA is in Dagestan, the former, it's up in the Caucasus area, southern Russia area, and that's land that was originally, or we would know it as a Khazar land of Khazars, and a lot of the Jews migrated up there, and they carried along with them the tradition that one group came up after the Assyrian captivity then once there was a community there, more came up from the Babylonian captivity. They just kind of sifted up in that direction, and they're known as the mountain Jews. They live up in the hills and subsistence farming, and they have synagogues, and they keep Sabbath and kosher, and they stay away from the rest of the people, but they have a very high concentration there of those who claim both from Judah as well as from the 10 tribes.
Mm-hmm. Well, it'll be a great day of celebration when we finally get together and let's see, 751. Oops. It must have been. It's that one where I'll find it. Isaiah 11, verse 13. I was reading that section about the banner for the nations, assemble the outcasts of Israel, verse 12, and gather together, disperse to Judah in the four corners of the earth. Also the envy of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not harass Ephraim. And boy, that's where we are today. Just can't get along. So, yeah, it's anything else anybody's got?
I was going to tell Dean, if he gets caught on a subject and he needs to ask some questions, to call Mike. I said he's got a photographic memory, and he's probably got stuff to do somewhere. All I have to do is ask him.
Well, does he ever give presentations here?
I don't know. Have you, Mike? Once, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, once, or yeah, more.
Sounds like he might be a good bet.
It's kind of like you, get him started, he doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike has presented several times.
Yeah, I just was telling someone that the other day, that don't get me started.
Yes.
One time, Mike and I went to Warsaw. We walked all the way back and sat in front of his apartment for a half hour or whatever, an hour, I don't know. And Mike said he was hungry, so we went to the restaurant and ate. Talked all the time, come back and talk some more, and finally had to go home. I just sit there and listen with my education. Now I can't go anywhere. A lot of people are happy about that. I can't play any jokes on them. Some people don't like my humor. They'll sit on something they thought was serious and it was a joke. They'll sit on it for a couple of weeks, and then they'll come back and challenge me. And I said, "Why didn't you say something then?" I said, "I was just pulling your leg." That goes on and on.
Well, Dean, I guess I kind of got in on the tail end of this, right? You gave your presentation already, huh?
Say again?
Yes.
I say I got in on the tail end of this. I didn't hear your presentation.
Oh, okay.
I just now, a few minutes ago, clicked into this and hadn't tried it before, but it's appears to have been an interesting presentation.
Very good. Huh? That was a good presentation. This first time you've been on?
Yeah, this first time.
I've been sitting here
I'll have to remember. We used to have kind of a late Sabbath evening dinner on Friday nights here, and so I sat down here and picked up the computer and put it on my lap and noticed your email, and so I thought I'd give it a try. And Here I am.
All right.
You ignored all those other emails, eh?
Oh no,
Okay.
your emails, I check them all out, Rich. Usually on my smartphone, though.
That wasn't the first one that said, you know.
Yeah. Oh, you mean as far as the
Notice.
going to meetings? Yeah, I tried one night, and for some reason I couldn't connect. That's been several weeks ago, and so I haven't been trying until tonight. And tonight I thought, well, I'll give it a shot and see what happens.
Well, is there someone? Is there a speaker every week?
We have a different speaker. We present this program on the first and third Friday nights of the month, or the Friday night before the first and third Sabbath, and then the second Sabbath we have a topic discussion during the Sabbath at noon. So,
okay.
First and third, 8 o'clock. Link becomes live at 7:30 for fellowship, and then on the second Sabbath, we have a topical discussion. Starting.
That's all Central Time, right, Don?
Everything Central Time, right?
Yeah.
Check their website if you forget it.
Yeah, the website is www.thinkgod.org.
Okay.
THNKGOG.org.
Pardon?
If Howard missed the talk, I guess it's being recorded. It says on my screen here. The session is being recorded.
Yes, we are recording.
Yeah, so and can I just go to the website and listen to it?
Yes, as soon as I get together and get it up there.
Okay.
We've consolidated some sites together. We've done a lot of changes in the last month and a half, so we're still ironing out some of the bumps, but we'll have them up there.
Must have made a change last week because I had an awful time getting out of the night. I had to copy it and paste it on several different search engines to get it to work.
Yeah, we're working. It's coming together. It's coming together. Just it doesn't seem like, it seems like the older we get, the more involved we get with work and everything else. It's I don't know. And then the feast is coming up, and we're all involved in the Iowa feast site. So, the Hagans, Anna Hagan is the one who does all the grunt work with the web stuff, and she's busy with life and great grandchild, and when he comes to visit, and helping Jeffrey with the feast plans.
Where is the Iowa feast site being held?
Moravia, Iowa, at the Honey Creek Resort.
And who's in charge of that?
Well, Jeffrey Hagan is Jeffrey's the I guess the official organizer this year, but he was the Jeff. You want to get in on this?
I'm sleeping now.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, it used to be Jeff Leedy that directed the site.
Yeah.
You know him, Dean?
Who?
Jeff Leedy. He's up there in Lansing, Michigan, I believe.
He was on here a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, he was.
I'm still missing the name.
Jeff
Leedy, Jeff Leedy, Ledy, I believe.
Lede.
No, I don't recognize the name. The reason I asked is because we have some friends out in western Iowa, and they're doing a feast site, but I think they're going to do it in South Dakota.
In Rapid City?
The what?
Rapid City? Rapid City, South Dakota?
No, not Rapid City. It's going to be closer to Iowa.
Sioux Falls?
Close to Sioux City, but it's not Sioux City. It's I'm not sure exactly where they're holding it.
Well, we're going to have one up at Glenwood Springs.
When we're talking feast sites here, if you know someone that's having a feast site, make sure they go to feastgoer.org and let us know so we can get it on the feast site.
Mm.
Feastgoer.org is a listing of all the festival sites.
Mm. Well, we've been going to Season of Our Joy down in Missouri for years, so we're committed there.
Where's that in Missouri, Dean?
It's on the Lake of the Ozarks.
Oh, okay.
And it's Tim and Angie Kelly. Some of you may know them.
Oh, yeah.
They're the chief organizers. I think Don knows them.
Oh yeah, I've worked with them before on several things. Are there just one more quick? Is there any other comments or questions about the topic?
Hey, Dean.
Alan?
Yeah, I'd like to ask you a question concerning Ephraim. Since Ephraim was born of an Egyptian woman, what long-range ramifications do you think that has for us today? For example, today we have a lot of Egyptian architecture in our nation's capital, obelisks, and we have a pyramid on the back of our dollar bill. I just wonder, all throughout the entirety of Scripture after the captivity of the northern tribes, it uses the name Ephraim more often than not to refer to, as a name for the general name of Israel. A lot of times. What's your understanding of the Egyptian influence on us today?
Well, as far as Ephraim being descended from an Egyptian woman, there's controversy about that, I know. In the rabbinic Jewish world, they like to claim that she was really somehow a descendant of Shem or something like that, not a descendant of the people in Egypt. But again, that's a speculation, and we can't go to the bank on it. Certainly, the tribes living there for so many years had to have an influence culturally on all of the tribes.
Yes.
I would see that as more likely than having an Egyptian mother for two of the children. These are questions. All we can do is speculate.
Right. The only reason I ask the question is because of the apparent symbols that we see with pyramids and obelisks that we have today in our country.
Yeah. Well, many people that I've read lay that to the Masonic influence, and the fact that there's that famous picture of George Washington with his white Masonic apron on, and many of them were Masons, or at least some of them were. And it depends how far you want to go with it. I'm reading a book right now called The Final Babylon, I think it is, saying that America is the Babylon of the mystery Babylon, if you will. And there certainly are a lot of prophetic indications, with the merchants mourning when the Babylon falls and all of that. But I like this definition that I heard years ago, that prophecy is not so that we will know the future, but so that when it comes to pass and we see it fulfilled, before our eyes, we'll know that God is God because He had it all figured out ahead of time. And I think there's great truth in that because, I come from a worldwide background, and people I meet now who did not, and they get into these setting dates for the return of Messiah and all of that, and I'll look at them and I'll say 1972 and we're through. And they look at me like I'm from Mars. And then I have to explain, of course, only us people that have been in worldwide for many, many years ago remember that 1975 in prophecy.
Yeah.
And I was out there in Pasadena at that time when 1972 came along, and I actually heard one of the leading ministers in a class use that phrase, 1972 and we're through. That was in 1969 or 70, I guess. That was the first year I was out there. And then 1972 was coming up fast and nothing was happening, and so I still remember we had a big meeting in the auditorium, or not in the auditorium, in the gym, and Herbert Armstrong, Garner Ted Armstrong were there, and the big news was this was the cocking of the gun. They were going to start advertising in Reader's Digest. And I kind of went away shaking my head, saying, what's that got to do with the prophecy, So I like that definition that once we see it come to pass, then we'll know for sure. And we will understand. In the meantime, we've got all these people out there with all these different prophetic teachings, and some of it gets quite bizarre, in my opinion. But I kind of wandered off from your question there, Alan. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
Oh, you're interested to listen to.
This is Mike again, and I just wanted to back you up on that our nation was founded after several hundred years of utopian philosophers were dreaming of creating a new world order without the Holy Roman Empire being involved, and the royalty and the church. And so our Constitution was basically a copy of the earlier Freemason Constitution, and the concept of being a secular New World Order, which is on our money, was the founding principle of the utopian dreamers, which basically involved the Freemasons, where they combined the Egyptian, the Babylonian symbolism, and then the Roman and Greek paganism, along with Christianity, and so our mother goddess is the Roman goddess Liberty. The Statue of Liberty is our matron goddess, and so our country was founded upon the Knights Templar, the Freemasons, that whole body of like Francis Bacon, the
Right.
various utopian philosophers.
Yeah, the Puritans didn't last long.
Right.
And but I see this argument go back and forth. Well, this country was founded as a Christian nation, and others say no, it wasn't. And again, at that point in time, what was Christian? It was no longer Puritan, that's for sure. I like to say my first Wheelock ancestor came over from England, was a nonconformist preacher. That was euphemism for being a Puritan, I guess, at that time. But so some things never change. Here I am, several generations down, and I'm a nonconformist preacher. At least in the eyes of some people. But
Troublemaker.
yeah, troublemaker. say it with a smile. They don't get so upset then.
All right, Dean, I got one more question.
Okay.
In James, the first chapter, verse 1.
Okay, James.
Yeah, James 1:1, where he's addressing this letter to the 12 tribes that are scattered.
Yep.
What do you think his understanding was of the 12 tribes being scattered, and his intent that this letter would be able to get out there and influence them?
I think that at that time it was still somewhat common knowledge amongst the more educated class, if you will, as to where the 12 tribes or the 10 tribes had gone. And certainly, you know, that they say 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, but Levi was also part of that. There's actually 13 tribes when you count Ephraim and Manasseh as 2, replacing Joseph, the one Joseph, as a birthright portion. And so we speak of the 12 tribes, and I think they had a pretty good idea where they were. In fact, there's some, if I recall correctly, in some of the rabbinic writings, there is a comments, or maybe it's Josephus, I can't remember for sure, that talks, I think it's Josephus, talks about the 10 tribes being taken captive and speaks about them beyond the river, a certain river, I can't remember what they called it. And we know where they are to this day, where the statement is made. And I believe that was Josephus. So that'd be 1st century. That'd be after or during or after the time of James. Well, when he wrote it would be after. Because James was martyred, I think, before Josephus defected. So I think he knew where they were. You know, there's a lot of speculation in Peter, that Peter is writing to well, he talks about
The dispersion.
those in Babylon. Somewhere he talks about those in Babylon. And they always say, well, he's writing to Rome, but I'm not sure that's true, personally. I think he might. There were a lot of Jews that still were back in Babylon to the east, and I know they later on called Rome Babylon. So again, it's unclear exactly who he's talking to, or where the people are that he's specifically writing to.
But he knew he wasn't writing only to the local church.
That's right. He certainly knew that. But this idea, you know, that I just touched on it, that the Galatians were really Celtic tribes. They're Celtic people. And that's in secular history. That's not in lost tribes history, so to speak.
So, Dean,
they had come back from Gaul, which is France, an area of France, to Asia Minor, to Turkey, if you will. And they were in a region called Galatia. And if we understand that the Celtic people are part of the lost tribes, specifically probably the seafaring tribes, Dan and so forth, then we have an ethnic group there within the children of Israel that had gone away and come back. Steve Collins has written an interesting book on the history of Parthia. I don't know if you've read that, any of you have read that or not. But Parthia was, he believed, was a empire that Rome never conquered. They had wars, but they never conquered them. And he believes that they were part of the lost tribes up in the area of Media and that region. And again, you know, I wish some well-known secular historian would grab onto this and begin to do some real research.
Actually, there has been. The Parthians were from Kazakhstan, and they brought in from Kazakhstan. Yeah, they brought in the Zoroastrian religion to Persia, and then the majority of them went back up into Central Asia after the Sassanids kind of took over. But you can trace that religion-wise, archaeologically, and genetically. And the Celtic people, you could trace back to Javan pretty clearly. The R1B, Javan.
Trace back to where?
Javan, the son of Noah, Japheth, you know, his...
Japheth, yeah.
Yeah, through Javan. And you had Tarshish, Kittim, and Ashkenaz. You know, they're all basically the same R1B. And then the R1A would be basically the Medes.
Have you written any of this up? Or you're just carrying it in your head?
Well, yeah, it's based upon the study I've done as far as you know, using the parameters of you know, the holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
You use the archaeological, the cultural findings, language group, and so like your Nordic tribes are from Shem through Lud, and you have the A1 and the A2, you know, A1A and A2. That the history goes back through Turkey and the Balkans area. It's all easily traceable. And then they had the Gothic language group, which the Anglo-Saxon language group is the most pure Gothic derivative. The English language is the most purely Gothic language. And that'd be your G. Came from around the northern Caspian Sea, and the Megagothia, and then your A. What's I? Oh, give me I A. You know, it goes I. Haplogroup is very close to the D in their history and language and culture and gods and goddesses and their history, the language, then they blended with the Celtic people, which were the Greek. So that's all pretty easily traceable with the DNA and with history and archaeology. The Indo-European language group versus the Semitic group, the alphabets. I mean, they even are putting the ancient, what they call it Hittite, that would be it's not the biblical Hittites. It's the Khadi people, K-H-A-T-T-I. They even use Paleo-Khadi language, with the cuneiform script. They're using it in movies as alien languages. You know, it's all pretty well known. Maybe a lot of us don't know it, but
yeah,
academic world.
So many things to study and read that it's
too much.
Too much. That's right. The older I get, the slower I go. But
the runic languages, you know, the runic alphabet is very similar to the Paleo-Khadi, H-A-T-T-I, which goes back to the Semitic language group.
What is your understanding of the relationship with the Phoenicians? Well, the ones that are called Phoenicians and Carthage, and ones who and the seafaring Israelite tribes like Dan and so on.
Actually, they teamed up with different groups. First was the Minoans, and then the Minoans had a little problem with the volcano, and so then the Phoenicians were traveling around the world over to the New World. So there's Minoan inscriptions in Upper Michigan,
right?
And they took a lot of copper out of Isle Royale, and also down into the land of the Incas. They found the DNA and the cultural were the Carthage kind of spread over and made Spain a colony, and then they derived their metals, which they sold to the Assyrians, and so then a lot of the R1B Celtic people were involved, with their trading also, and the descendants are in the Upper Amazon area, and they trace through several parameters, and as well as their oral history. But basically, they have white-skinned, red-haired people that were there before Columbus came, and they used their weapons were a sling, just like they use in the area of Carthage. But Hannibal was actually Phoenician, and his father, their family name was Barca. So Barcelona was named after the royal family that was in Carthage, which came from Phoenicia, and I think it's Isaiah 36, or is it 20? I'm forgetting off the top of my head. I'm not quite as photographic as Rich says, but there's a whole chapter of prophecy about the Phoenicians and how they would travel across the sea and get into a war with the Romans, and then move on from there, and the whole history was prophesied. So you can track they're basically the Y haplogroup, very similar to the Egyptians. And
so would you say that amongst the Phoenicians were a lot of the Danites?
Well, see, there's a lot of Y haplogroup in Lebanon, and so did that come from the Assyrians or the Aramaeans? That's a good question. But it started with the Minoans, the worldwide travel and the boats, and then the Phoenicians picked it up, and then the Kati, the people who became the Vikings, made full circle. They started from Turkey and went up into northern Europe, and then came full circle back, and there's quite a few of them in Sardinia, and so you can follow their DNA trail as well as their language and the other cultural things, and so that's where the Vikings had the same basic sailing ship as the Phoenicians, which were the same as the Minoans, and they all traveled around the world, and definitely during the time of Solomon had a very close relationship with the Phoenicians, and they went out on trips around the world together, gathering wealth. So that's over maybe actually 1,000 or 1,500 year period that those travels were taking place, starting with the Minoans.
Very interesting.
Yeah. The knowledge is increased at the end time.
Okay, any other questions, thoughts, ideas? Okay, well, if there isn't any other comments or thoughts or ideas, that's going to. Oh, do I hear a voice in there?
Says Donald Wells is talking on my screen.
Okay. If there's no other comments, then what we'll do is we'll say this is the official end of the presentation, and we'll just open it up for general fellowship. I'm going to stop the recording.